Well, it is the Olympics.
What?
Hi, I'm Fester, and I'm a scruffy looking Nerf Herder.
They have no legs. They're just so cute.
We really need to make more videos of us playing with lightsabers. Just saying. That's
Oh god,
pretty awesome.
it's just straight up production value, is what that is.
It's fucking awesome is what it is. Well, anyways, welcome everybody to another episode of the Infernal Brotherhood of Scruffy Looking Nerf Herders, and that was horribly hard to say. This is your now bi-monthly live Star Wars vidcast. My fans. Welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Adam.
I'm Cameron. It says right there on the screen.
As evidenced by our name tag.
Oh, actually, no. My name is Jeff.
Oh,
Can't
shit,
really see
you're
it, but
alive.
yeah.
Who are you?
I'm Jeff.
The body
Adam.
snatchers.
Adam in the cult of Arwen. All hell Yorkies.
Satan!
No, Yorkies.
Oh, sorry. My bad. If it's not Star Wars, I don't know what you're talking about.
Fair enough.
We're going to be talking about the Force today and the various ways. Is my audio like on par? Because I feel like. Are you hearing me okay?
It's good on my end.
Is it? Is it now?
Well, I mean, I have to hear your voice, but
Okay.
it's coming through clear.
You're like, I can't stand it, but it's the audio level is sufficient.
Sounds right.
Sufficiently annoying as per usual. No, we're gonna be talking about the Force, and this is solely because, as I think we collectively see it, the Force has shifted, is altered, has changed throughout the original trilogy to today, and today I mean The Last Jedi. And sort of, you know, moving on into the Disneyifying of the Star Wars universe. Good or bad, no judgments, but it is different.
Glorious.
That was pre-Disney. That was George Lucas fucking his own shit up.
Fair enough.
We're going to get into that. At the very top of the show, you saw this really wonderful video of a gentleman saying he was a scruffy-looking Nerf herder. You can give it, or
You totally should.
you can
I
give
did.
us, well, you did.
But they can, too.
This is to everyone out there that isn't you. Boop. You can give us your oh my eye, your videos as well. All you have to do is get your smartphone, even if it's not a smart one, and make a video of you saying, "Hi, my name is whatever your name is. I'm a scruffy-looking Nerf herder," and email it to us, and we're gonna put it at the top of a show. That's it. You're a part of the show. You're a part of history forever.
And how awesome is that?
It's pretty goddamn awesome.
Tens of people will see it.
Literally. Tens of people. No, it's all for fun, and you can email it to theinfernalbrotherhood@gmail.com.
He remembered it, folks. He remembered it.
I don't know I was going to do that, but I ended up punching myself. All right, so the Force. Where do we want to start on this thing? It's a big...
Well, let's start from the start.
Messy
From
beginning.
Star Wars.
40 years ago, Star Wars, before it was A New Hope. I have some visual aids. And,
I even star wiped. Oh man, that was awesome.
You see that? That was nice.
God, that's production.
This is, hey, you know what? We don't like to skimp.
Mm-hmm.
We don't.
Whatever. We like chimps. We don't like to skip.
Speaking of AIDS, that was a monkey, not a chimp. Are they different? All right, so our first introduction to the idea of the Force, of course, is 40 years ago, the release of Star Wars, and we were introduced to it in the exact same manner as was Luke Skywalker, the young farm boy, moisture farmer on Tatooine from our, at the time, just old wizard. Actually, it wasn't even a wizard.
Space Wizard.
Space Wizard, sorry.
Yeah, Space Wizard, yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or old Ben. Uncle Ben. He liked to make rice. I don't know if you knew that. It was a subplot. Uncle Ben made rice. food reference.
Yeah.
All right, so can you tell us exactly like the first definition of the Force?
Well, to paraphrase, it's the unifying force. It's what creates us. It's what binds us. It's what unites us, and it is everything.
Yeah, so Obi-Wan defined it as an energy field created by all living things, which is an interesting way of approaching something that you would then be able to leverage to exert your will onto the universe. So you literally, it seemed, took control of this force field and manipulated life because of it.
Yep.
And this is like every 80s movie ever that dealt with like black magic or Wiccans or pagans or anything. They all tried to do this exact same thing, but in Star Wars, it worked consistently. It was wonderful. So it tapped into our, I don't know. And was this something that you connected to at all? It's very much from an era. Do you think if Star Wars didn't exist in the 70s when there was a lot of sort of pseudoscience mumbo-jumbo permeating our collective cinematic culture, would it have worked nowadays if it wasn't introduced back then, do you think?
I mean, that's of course hard to say. I don't think it would have had the same impact if it was done today as, you know, when it was done. Because this was, I mean, it's a science fiction film. It's the 70s. That shit's always been a thing, but Lucas took it in a direction that nobody had ever really considered. I had a tangent to go off, and it just went out. Sorry, folks. But no, I don't think it would have had the same impact. I mean, much like you said, I mean, that's a lot of movies, especially in the 80s, had that idea of manipulation of outside forces. I mean, even the cheesy horror movies like Ghoulies. I mean, there's a really great example.
Awesome. In its day.
Love it's in its day.
In its day.
You, sir.
it needs to stay in its day.
No, it just got re-released on Blu-ray, and I am
my gosh,
digging shit. And I just watched it just a couple days ago.
Good on you.
Still, what's up? I guess.
Good on you. Good on you. That's
Yes.
all I have to say. For you. Someone's got to keep it alive.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, I think being of its time, it had much more of an impact, and especially at this point in time, like it's permeated culture. The whole idea of the Force, even if you don't really know Star Wars, you know what the Force is in a general term.
Which is weird. It's something that is very specific to a very specific cinematic universe that has broken outside of it and has literally permeated the vernacular of a culture. That is insane.
It is. I like in my line of business, I talk to a lot of people every day, and I've had discussions about the Force with people that have never seen a Star Wars movie, and they actually kind of understand. Like they hit certain points just right, and it's like, God, how this is amazing.
That's wild. That is wild.
It's amazing.
So there's a couple things that I want to touch on, because the way that the Force is portrayed in the original trilogy is very sequential in the sort of pulling the shades back of what is really possible in this idea. And then the novels of what is now Legends really went into insane depth about what the Force is and the different aspects of the Force, that there was, in fact, aspects of the Force.
Yeah.
It wasn't just this one singular idea. And, you know, you broke into this Legends version of the expanded universe, and it was like Alice in Wonderland in her journeys. She just kept exposing herself to more and more insane ideas. That's what the Force ultimately became, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. It was a spectrum. It wasn't just one
the
side and
autism
another. It
Star Wars
totally was somehow. I would probably more akin it to the sexual spectrum.
Oh,
But that's just me.
Okay. Okay. We're going to have to explore that in another episode.
Yes.
Parallels between the sexual and Force spectrums.
Hey, that's what people. Look at me. Obviously, I think about stupid shit like that. It
I
happens.
dig it, man. That's cool. Hi, Lolly. Good to see you, honey. All right, so I want to talk about the aspects of the Force, but before I do that, I want to talk about the way that we were first introduced visually on the silver screen to what the Force was capable of. And so in A New Hope, what were the different ways that we were shown the Force could be used?
Well, you had your physical manifestations. The first time we ever actually experience it is when Vader's choking someone out. It's the first time we ever see anything happen of it.
Yeah.
Right, 'cause, he didn't do any bolt blasting. Yeah. So, we got that. And then
I was going to jump to the mind trick, but yeah, that was way before that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and even before that, we have the vocal projection, which, of course, through all the different releases have been many different things. My favorite being the distorted Dachshund sound. You get the vocal projection. That's weird, but that's a thing. And then, of course, then we get to the mind tricks and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what was next.
It's wild because they were just sort of like magician's tricks.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
it was really cool choking someone out, and so that was the most physical manifestation version that we saw. And it wasn't until we actually got to Empire Strikes Back that we saw that aside from choking someone out, you could actually manipulate objects. Like, that was a big thing. And so it wasn't so much that Darth Vader was this isolated, powerful creature in this universe that could do these wonderful things. In Empire, you really understand that, oh wow, he can like draw a lightsaber to himself even if he's hanging upside down hurt, or he can lift rocks with Yoda sitting on his feet, or Yoda could lift up an X-wing. But there was a difference between what the realities of the perceptions of what how am I going to explain this? How you perceive the Force equals your ability to manipulate the real world.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting concept and like sort of the pivotal lesson for Luke Skywalker.
I still remember how blown my mind was the first time that Yoda said that. It's like, whoa, holy shit, if I think I can do it, I can do it? And then, of course, I can't levitate a fucking X-wing or anything or choke my brother. But
how many hours
still
as a kid did you just stare at things?
As a kid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or adult.
Okay, I'm going to throw this out there right now. If anybody says that they don't try every now and then, even as an adult, they're full of shit. Just like scanning somebody. Like, every now and then it's like, God, it might work.
I could do it. It was amazing. And so when you finally saw that, well, here was the other part of it, is it was a slow introduction, which was very fitting for the trilogy as it was unveiled. Because, hey, Jana, as an adult child, that's right. We were exposed to the Force with Luke. So no one knew anything. We were learning just like he did, you know? He was sitting there with his lightsaber and this blast shield over his face trying to deflect blaster bolts from this droid, and Han Solo's laughing at him. Like, the absurdity, how ridiculous he looked while still tapping into this greater framework of the universe was really exciting as a kid.
Oh yeah, it felt attainable. Even though you knew it was all bullshit, it felt like it could be a thing.
Possibilities. And then, of course, from the original film, Obi-Wan Kenobi telling Darth Vader, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine, and him becoming one with the Force. And that never having been explained for, like, 5 more movies, was it? It was like 4 or 5 more movies before that was actually explained what that meant. Because it was like the second film, right? Where Yoda actually explains.
Dude, I don't remember Attack of the Clones. That's the one I never
Blocked
watched.
it out.
I have blocked it out. Aside from the Battle of Geonosis, it just the book. Okay, the book. I enjoyed the book, but it's also one that I haven't read more than one time.
Yeah. Well, I've never read the books more than once, but I have watched them films more than once for sure.
Yeah.
Including episode 2. But either way, until Yoda explains to Obi-Wan that Qui-Gon Jinn is still alive in the living force and alludes that there is a way that they can commune with him and then themselves become one with the force.
Yeah.
It's never explained. And so it's this big, crazy, like, what the fuck? Even when Yoda dies, it doesn't explain it.
Nope.
Which was crazy. He was just like, it's my time. I'm 400 years, bitch. Fuck off. Like,
Did you say 400 years?
When 400 years? 900 years?
He was 900 when he died.
900. My
Not
bad.
400.
I missed a couple
Jeez.
birthdays.
Okay, fair enough. You know what? Who
500
hasn't?
birthdays.
Who hasn't?
We're getting off tangent. We're not at the prequels yet. Okay, so
No.
Are you looking at notes? Do you have our notes up?
I've got the notes right.
Do you
in my
want to
hand.
go over the cis? Oh boy. Oh boy.
the 6 aspects of the Force?
Yes.
Why, absolutely,
Since
Adam.
I can't.
Oh, hold on. And of course, that's when my stupid computer has to do that stuff. Okay. Anyways, the 6 aspects of the Force. Obviously, we all know about the light side and the dark side. The living force, which, of course, was explained by Yoda. The unifying force, the cosmic force, and the physical force. Those are the 6 aspects.
Yeah, and so breaking those down, it's crazy because on the surface, we understand, of course, the light and dark side. That's explained very clearly, good and bad. And then when you start getting into the EU, you start defining what the light and dark is. So for the light side, you have compassion and selflessness, self-knowledge and enlightenment, healing, mercy, and benevolence. You want to explain the dark side? Evil.
Yes, evil. It's all about power, knowledge, like absolute knowledge. Just not being biased on what you want to learn. And let's see. Pulling up the stuff right now. Sorry. Computer's crapping out on me. Yep, and phone just died too.
Okay. So it's a lot of like fear, hatred, covetousness. Like I covet your women's and your things, aggression and jealousy.
And a lot of it's embracing, of course, those emotions, the strong emotions, and using them for your, to basically get what you want out of what you want, more or less.
Yeah, like leveraging your emotions to your bidding rather than trying to make a distinction between you and your emotions, like your mind and your emotions. And then you have the living force and the unifying force, the cosmic force, and the physical force. Like there's these 4 very confusing, it really should be lumped into one, but it's very separate. So the living force is, of course, the energy of all living things. That is what Obi-Wan Kenobi is speaking to when he's talking about the force that connects us and binds us. The unifying force is sort of the space and time, the cosmic element of the force. I'm sorry, that's actually a straight up lie. That's just the entirety of space and time. Then the cosmic force is life after death. That's where the force ghosts go to. And then the physical force is anything that's actually like the air between people. That's what you're manipulating if you're lifting something or moving something. And so it does get very confusing, especially because it almost seems like it was intentionally made confusing. Like, why should we truly explain this? It's like trying to understand, if you understand Christianity at all, Catholicism, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Like, what are the separations between the 3? What do they each signify in that mythology? Well, that's how I perceive the Force. It's very confusing. They overlap a little bit.
Well, and it makes sense because it makes it, I mean, from a storytelling standpoint, it makes it very open. When lines are very blurry, you can easily just sneak stuff in. Like, I mean, that's a lot of what happened in the books, in the legends, or the now legends.
Yeah, and it's weird because the entirety of the original trilogy is about this idea of the Chosen One. But I don't know, and that how that is intimately connected with the idea of the Force. And I don't know that that was ever even really developed until the prequels. Right? Like, in the original trilogy, did they even really explain that Darth Vader was a Chosen One, or what that even means?
No, I don't believe so.
The idea of redemption and everything, as the viewer, you would immediately pin it on Luke. Like, he was the one the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting. Okay, so let me see if I can move into prequel territory here. So, with the prequels, we were first introduced to a reimagining of what the Force means. So, let me take a step back really quick. In Empire Strikes Back, we experience with Luke Skywalker his understanding and development of his Force abilities, and then they really sort of skyrocket in Return of the Jedi. And what's interesting about that journey is that you're experiencing it from this son's perspective of trying to redeem his father. Yeah. Less about the Chosen One or the idea of the Force, and thematically, the themes were the hero's journey. Like that was the theme. As soon as we get to prequel territory, the theme changes from the hero's journey into something much grander. And that is the sort of the fallen redemption of an individual in this, what is now identified as, the Chosen One Jedi prophecy.
Yeah.
So Jana and Lolly are like having a good conversation about cookies. Apparently in the chat room. All right, ladies. I want a cookie now.
Yeah, what the fuck?
God, give us some. Okay, so Qui-Gon Jinn sort of and this is in the Phantom Menace, our first exposure to the young Anakin Skywalker, slave boy.
Little orphan Annie.
Little orphan Annie in every possible way, all jokes included. How does Qui-Gon describe the Force to Annie?
They're bacteria that live in your body. And that's the only mention ever made of it.
Midi-chlorians.
Yeah.
Midi-chlorians. These little bacteria. These living entities.
Yes, living entities that make up everything.
So it's not so much as the Force between us that connects us and binds us together. It is individual bacteria living within us that communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So it goes from being
how you manipulate it.
It goes from being between us to within us. And it's a very, very significant change in vision. Which is really strange. Do you think the reason... Okay, I don't even know. Why do you think the reason is behind this change?
I think it was just to change how we saw the Force. But it really didn't affect it any. I mean, aside from that asinine explanation that just no other movies reference them, like, period. But, yeah, I think it was just... I don't know why he did it.
See, I think the only reason, at least the only reason I can rationalize, is to explain why Anakin was special. To quantify it in some way. To say, I guess he's special because he has so many more than everyone else. He's even got more than Yoda. So that sort of sets the tone of, well, he must be. If you need a reason for a character to believe in a prophecy and to believe that then the chosen one in a prophecy is real, then you need some sort of tangible leveraging evidence of that. And so I think that's the reason why he shoehorned the idea of midi-chlorians, to prove his point that Qui-Gon's not fucking stupid. This is why he thinks it. Everyone else disbelieves it. Thing. But this is why he believes it. So it was shoehorned in there, and it was a hard pill to swallow. But in the moment, like watching it, much like with the Last Jedi, when you're experiencing it, you're like, I don't care if it makes sense or not. I'm just having fun. It's not until afterward that you start going, wait, what?
Oh, yeah. Well, as a child seeing that movie, it was just sort of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. the first time you see it, and then it's like, wait, no, why? That doesn't make sense. Why are you doing this?
I gotta take a step back here. When you said as a child watching that, like, I was stationed in Germany serving in the military when that came out as a child. Oh my god! I'm
Yes,
so
you're
old.
you're that old, Adam.
God damn it!
God, let's see what that was. 99, so I would have been. Oh, I guess I wouldn't have been that young. What was that? 13?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, about 13 was when that came out. 12 or 13. I don't know.
Let's
Math
stop
is
talking
dumb.
about it. Let's
Yeah.
stop talking about it. So the idea of the Force at this time starts to shift in the explanation that it's almost like this sentient entity, because rather than just being the force between you that binds us and connects us, it's living bacteria that allow you to tap into it, that allow you to manipulate it. So not everyone has this bacteria. Not everyone has the same amount of bacteria.
Everybody does have it.
Oh, okay.
Just not everybody has the quantity of it.
Okay, so it's the quantity that defines whether or not you have the capacity to manipulate or even recognize it.
Well, it's like the idea
Even now, I'm confused.
of the midi-chlorians having a hive mind.
They're
That obviously, the more powerful will control the lesser, type of thing.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Jana says it's like having an extra chromosome. They are the Down syndrome of the Star Wars universe.
No, I love Downs people. They're cute, and I want to hug them all.
Oh my gosh.
Not midi-chlorians.
Let's move on. Let's move on before this gets wildly offensive. I
And
remember this
Duke's
conversation the
getting
first
rid
time
of
we had it. Okay, so it's at this point I think we need to sort of do like a two-step and bounce between the Legends version and the canon version, because the canon version of the Force doesn't exclude midichlorians. It just, as you had mentioned before, it doesn't really address them. But it does change the aspect nature of the Force from the 6 aspects of the Force to just now 2. They don't ever mention anything else in anything that I've ever found. It's always just 2. And so they've taken all of those 6 and distilled them down to just the living Force and the cosmic Force. So the idea that once Qui-Gon Jinn was cut down by Darth Maul in an epic end battle that was the only redeeming quality of that movie.
Jar Jar Binks.
Oh, what? Oh, come on. Oh, come on. To be fair, I didn't hate him as much as everyone else seems to hate him nowadays, but anyway. You have living beings interacting with the Force, hence living Force, and then you have Force ghosts, hence the cosmic Force. And the idea that the cosmic Force is aware of this idea of balance, and that Anakin was created because of a need, because the Sith were far too powerful an influence in the universe. He had to have been created as the chosen one to create said balance. And George Lucas has said over and over again after the third film of the prequels that yes, Anakin was the chosen one. His fall and redemption in the original 6 were about Anakin and the Chosen One prophecy, and it was in fact fulfilled, which is why I believe, and we're sort of moving forward quickly here and we'll bounce right back, that we don't have to deal with the idea of Jedi or Sith in the way in this new trilogy, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, like we did with the original 6. So,
And that would, that makes sense.
So that's why it was a completed idea. No need to sort of revisit that idea. However, I'm going to see if I can jump through any more photos. The idea of Anakin Skywalker as a young slave boy coming up and learning the ways of the Force as a Jedi, but never truly being able to disconnect himself from his experience and his own fears and frailties, being able to move past those aspects of the dark side of the Force, and then, of course, his grand fall in Episode 3 into the identity of Darth Vader as a Sith Lord. And this is really the very beginning and the very ending in the trilogy identity of the dark side of the Force. Like,
Yeah.
you could say what you want about the Emperor, but even as powerful as the Emperor was, whenever you think dark side, it's always Vader. Like,
Oh, of course.
for me, it's always Vader. Which is weird because the more you explore that character in the EU, and I'm sorry, Legends, and even now in canon, Vader was much more complex than ever really presented in the old Legends. Like, he was very much just sort of a slave to the master. But
Yeah.
the more
He was
you
very
delve-
much the apprentice.
Yeah, the more you delve into it, you realize he had machinations of his own.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was not content, which was kind of cool. And like, I like
Oh,
that. Yeah. But then after the prequels, things changed even more. Actually, this was I have these out of order clearly. Things changed dramatically as soon as the prequels ended and we got into the cartoon world of the Clone Wars. This is where the Force went from the Force that connects us and binds us to midi-chlorians that allowed you to access, and the more midi-chlorians you had, the more powerful you were in the Force, to something entirely wildly crazy off the boat, that there was this cosmic Force intelligence that wasn't just something that sort of out of nowhere created a balance factor between dark and light, but they were actually avatars of the dark and light and the balance factor itself. And so in the Clone Wars, they introduced the idea of the Celestials. Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
Holy
Yeah,
shit. So you want to talk about the Celestials real quick?
Well, it's also been years since I watched Clone Wars, but yeah, just the idea that they were the ones in control of things. Like, it wasn't chaos. Like, we understand the universe, where it's just basically a star farted and now we're all here.
That's
they
the
don't
most
have
simplistic explanation of the Big Bang I've ever heard.
Oh yeah, no, we're all just star fart
We're all
particles. Yeah.
We're Star Shard.
Yeah, there you go. I like that better. But yeah, no, it was instead of it just being chaos and random, like, these were the beings that were literally moving things where they deemed it to be, controlling things the way they thought it should go, and watching the universe play out.
It's wild because at the Clone Wars era, you still had George Lucas in control, and so he was very much approving these ideas, this expansion of the idea of the Force, that it wasn't this amorphous, mindless entity that was trying to find a balance. It was actual creatures that were manipulating this. And so the idea of the Celestials was brought into some of the video games. It was brought into some before the Clone Wars was ever out. The Old Republic had Celestial references in it.
Yep.
But these Celestials were personified in the Clone Wars cartoon, and this is the second iteration of the Clone Wars cartoons. If you guys didn't know, there was an original, I think it was like a 9 or 10 episode run of the Clone Wars in a very different animated style, which actually portrayed General Grievous in a terrifying way that the movies, this is before.
Well, that was, I mean, I only ever saw the movie. I didn't actually watch the series because I saw that movie I got 20 minutes in and I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm checking out. But that's when they actually go like through his backstory, right? Like, pre being a robot? So there was the Clone Wars that was the animated story that series that came out between episode 1 and episode 2 of the prequels. And then there was the Clone Wars TV show that came out after episode 3 that sort of redacted that original Clone Wars trilogy. Okay. Yeah,
so the original Clone Wars, I mean, he was in the original trilogy, they were trying, animated stories, they were trying to explain why he has that cough, because Mace Windu fucked him up. But they were trying to instill this idea of power and authority to the character before you saw him on the cinematic screen. Why he was so terrifying to everyone, and especially Jedi. He was a Jedi hunter, and he murdered Jedi like en masse. Like, he went in and Jedi surrounded him, and he was the only one that came walking out. Like, he was this terrifying visage, and then he turned into this sort of comic-y, one-linery, not quite as goofball as people reflect on him now, but he wasn't as terrifying as he was before. He was very much a Vader-esque type character in the original, but in the new Clone Wars.
Sounds like I might actually have to try to
You
suffer
should,
through watching
you should
it.
seriously watch them. They was really good. Anyway, yeah, Jana's right. You need to step up your nerd game, Cameron.
Dude, I've never even seen a Star Wars before. I'm making it all up.
Talking on my ass. What is the Star Wars you speak of? Okay, so the idea of the Celestials were personified in they were called the Ones. And so this was the father, the son, and the daughter. And it was in an episode that they drew in Anakin into, I'm looking at my notes, it's called the Realm World of Mortis, where Anakin is actually exposed with his Padawan Ahsoka and his master Obi-Wan Kenobi with the realities of his role in the cosmic force as the chosen one. Like, it was alluded to before in the Jedi Council behind Anakin's back. Obi-Wan, I think, slipped some mentions to him, but this was the moment that Anakin really owned it outside of the actual films, that this was who he was. Yeah. And he actually had a vision in this of who he would become in Darth Vader, which was really exciting to see, even though it was a cartoon screen, to see it on screen. And this battle between himself of light and dark, protection of his master and his Padawan, the loss of them, the implications of that loss, how that would push him down these different paths, and explore the idea of the Force through this celestial family on Mortis. And it almost made it sort of cartoonish and ridiculous that these three celestial entities somehow personified the Force and were then the way that you would perceive the Force moving forward, as this family unit rather than this amorphous energy or something, you know?
Yeah.
It's similar, in my opinion, to, again, I'm going to call back to that Christian idea of the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. It calls back to mythologies where you do have this sort of ultimate bad guy and ultimate good guy, and then this unifying parental figure, you know, trying to keep everyone at arm's length, like, don't fight in the back, or I'm going to turn this goddamn car around. We're not going to go on vacation if you don't shut up.
And then they never make it to Wally World. Stupids.
It's true. Nice reference. And so there were some other Force wielders that are considered at now canon. And this is what I thought was interesting about the Clone Wars, is that it didn't just explore the Chosen One prophecy, which was interesting and strange and confusing, but it also explored with Yoda through Qui-Gon Jinn the idea of the priestesses.
Yeah.
And these were literally the personifications of the Force. And so the priestesses were 5 aspects of the same celestial individual that were serenity, joy, anger, confusion, and sadness. Which, again, we're going down this weird Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole of trying to, like, bounce around explaining this mythology that, do they need to? Like, before I talk about Yoda, do you think it's even necessary to dive into this detail in order to explain how Yoda learns how to become one with the Force?
No, I don't think it was necessary, but I did appreciate the story arc. Because, I mean, that's how the show ended, right? Because that's when they were introduced. It was the final 3 episodes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was one of those things that it wasn't necessary, because we already know Yoda becomes one with the Force. We've all seen it well before all this. But it is one of those nice little, like, But it is nice to kind of see his journey to understanding that, which actually shows, I don't know. Okay, for me, Yoda was always not, like, I never really looked at him like a mortal being. I mean, he was, obviously, we all watched him die, but he was almost like a demigod, where there was a part of him that wasn't wholly of this, like, of the mortal realm. And then to see that he couldn't just do something like everybody else does, like with Qui-Gon, like with Obi-Wan, Like they died, and that was that. They became one with the Force. Like he actually had to learn how to do it. So it really added to the character, for me at least. Like not so much the story, but it gave another depth to Yoda that I never considered.
It was weird because the more they built on Yoda in the Clone Wars, the more I kept reflecting back on that Obi-Wan throwaway line, "That's more midichlorians than Yoda has." And so the more it paid off the idea that Darth Vader was really a bad mamma jamma.
Yeah.
Like really bad. And if the Emperor was stronger than Vader, then no wonder Yoda couldn't defeat him in Episode 3.
Yeah.
And so it really made you think, holy crap, how powerful was the Emperor really? like if he was better than Vader, who was innately better than Yoda, why would Yoda even bother trying to stand up to him? Like, he knew he couldn't fight him. And it just, I don't know, it's the more I reflected on it, the more it made sense. Because at the time when I watched that movie, that was the worst part to me. Because you're literally for, 20 years from the original trilogy to the prequels, you were shown that Yoda was the most powerful. Like, straight up. Like, he was the master for a reason. And then you had that great scene in Episode 2 at the end where he fought Count Dooku, and he was, like, bouncing around and just sort of playing and absorbing Force lightning. You're just like, oh my gosh, this creature is so crazy. Like, he really is a master. And then to see him get owned by...
Yeah, that Senate scene, oh my god. That's one of the only redeeming factors of the prequel trilogy for me. Like, I could just watch that on loop and be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was wild. So then to see Yoda sort of fleshed out that much more, you see his discovery of the idea, which, total irony. The reason why Anakin is lured to the dark side is the promise of immortality, but if he just would have stayed with the light side, he would have found it anyway.
Yeah.
You cannot get more ironic than that. Like, his entire... I genuinely felt that there was a... when that was revealed, it was like a retcon. It was like a slight. It was like a troll of the idea of the chosen one through Anakin.
Yeah.
Like, why would you make it that way? Like, if there was this ultimate journey and the single thing that the chosen one wanted to do was to find that solution, why would you then make him go to the side that didn't have it? Like, that is just painful. Painful to watch. And it just makes him look stupid. Like, instead of going along the ride of fear and, understanding his fears and rage at times, now you're just like, you're a fucking idiot. Dummy.
Yeah.
Which sort of lessened Vader to me in a little bit, but that's okay. It's a story. Anyway, going back to, he does, in the end, he does find it, Draven, that's true. Hey, how's it going, by the way? So, going back to Yoda here and the priestesses, I think this was the most entertaining Yoda arc. To be fair, in the entire Clone Wars, Yoda was always exciting in it. Like, his first introduction was that episode with the clones, and he was explaining, even though you're a clone, there are individual traits that you have that make you different and special.
And he's the only one that ever really acknowledged that.
Yeah.
Well,
I think in a way, I don't know that Obi-Wan ever did, but Anakin definitely put Cody on a separate level, Commander Cody.
Yeah.
So it was nice that he saw separation, even though it was probably just familiarity and working with that one clone. But, but yeah, I mean, Yoda always saw everything differently. He looked within them rather than seeing their of course, cloned visage. So he sort of fights this aspect of himself, the dark side aspect of himself, and at times it starts to get silly and weird, but it's still kind of fun. And then you see that ultimately he is chosen by this priestess group. So I want to take a quick step back if I can here, because the first time that we're introduced to the idea of becoming one with the Force is when we see Yoda in Return of the Jedi disappear. No, I'm sorry, that's a straight up lie. Is it when we see Obi-Wan struck down by Darth Vader in the first episode? I'm sorry, I totally forgot 2 fucking films. So we understand that off the bat, this is a thing. Yeah. It's never explored until Clone Wars, which was a cartoon that was like 5 years later. Yeah. Or 32 years later or something like that. Like insane. Like, how did Qui-Gon Jinn understand that he could then become one with the Force? Well, he had to go visit the priestess and the 5 aspects of the priestess and prove himself. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, then that means that in order for him to do it, he had to teach Yoda and tell Yoda to go to this, it's called the Wellspring of Life. And it's the link between the cosmic and the living force, sort of the center of the known universe. Of all life in the universe. So Yoda goes there, passes these tests, these arbitrary, really weird physicality type tests.
Yeah.
That he then imparts to Obi-Wan at some point. Like, we haven't explored that at all, but we know that it's sort of in the mail. Like, do you think that the Obi-Wan movie that is rumored to come out, if it does come out, that it'll explore that idea?
I hope so. It'd be nice to see something like that in live action. Like, I can't imagine it would be the same necessarily. Like, I would imagine each person that has to go through it goes through their own journeys, their own trials and stuff. Like, that would be wildly different. So I'd love to see that brought to the screen. It's weird
because, like, the Jedi trials are all pretty much similar as we've been explaining. Not similar as in this place, this time, but, you know, the process.
Yeah.
It's all pretty similar.
Well, and I mean, a lot of them were, especially if you go into, like, the Old Republic era, where they had special temples that were solely just for that.
Yeah.
I mean, even it explores it in not even just the Old Republic, like the basically in between times, oh man, I just had a complete brain fart. Like the Force Unleashed,
right?
Like Starkiller goes to a lot of those places, and it does seem pretty straightforward, like just actual tests.
Yeah,
everybody does the same thing. It's just
It would be interesting.
I would hope it's not like that.
Do you think that a modern audience would? Because we're geeks. We study this type of stuff through the comics and the novels and the animated stories and the movies. But the average movie goer, do you think they would even be able to comprehend the sort of complexities of this?
I don't, if they laid it out in a way that was laid out in the Clone Wars. Now, of course, truth be told, 3 episodes, I mean, that's basically a feature anyways. So given that Star Wars, each episode becomes longer and longer, you know, there's plenty of time that they could explain it in the same way that they explained Yoda's journey. But I don't think it could be done properly without a lot of groundwork, and it's just, you're not going to be able to get that with a movie, whereas you can with a series.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there would have to be a lot of sort of explaining of the philosophies of the Force and complexities, the difference between the living and the cosmic, and it would be like a lot of monologue.
It would be, and I think it'd be boring. Because, you know, in an episodic adventure like the Clone Wars, it makes sense. You get little tidbits here and there, but to throw that in a movie and to keep it, you know, well under 3-hour runtime, you're just going to kind of like throw it at you and not make it entertainment. Just sort of like, here's some knowledge for you. I think there's probably a way it could be done, but it just, everything that comes to mind just seems like it'd be kind of boring. Yeah. Like, not just for like an average audience member, but even possibly for someone like us.
Yeah, it would have to be leveraged in a very specific, special way for sure.
Yeah.
Because even as a fanboy, an admitted fanboy, I find some of these ideas of the Force sort of silly and ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
And I just ignore them because it's convenient to ignore them.
Yeah.
So we sort of just latch on to what we like and we disregard what we don't like, and that's just sort of how Star Wars universe is. And how could it be anything but that when you have 40 years of storytelling?
Oh yeah.
You know, in all of the comics and all of the video games and all of the role-playing games and all of the books, novels, in all the films. I mean, it could be nothing but that. Sort of like what you like, discard what you don't like.
Yeah.
So let me see what's next here. So now Rebels comes out. And this is an interesting era because this is when the Clone Wars were artificially cut short because Disney bought LucasArts and Disney wanted to start their own thing. And so they stopped Clone Wars immediately, even before the planned episodes had an opportunity to be released. And they ended up starting up this new series called Rebels, which is before even A New Hope, episode 4. And we were start to introduce new type of Force sentient species. So the Force has yet evolved again from being these sort of physical aspects, these physical representations of these amorphous ideas that we were introduced to in the Clone Wars, to now multiple cultures actually have different views and practices of the Force. And so this Zeb Aurelius, he's one of the crew of the Rebels group here. I mean, pivotal character, great character. His design is actually the original Chewbacca design.
Yep.
Which was, from Ralph McQuarrie, which is really kind of cool. But his species is called a Lasat, and they have a Force culture that is actually explored in one of the episodes. I think it was like season 3. That was really kind of cool. But it expanded on the idea that the Force isn't just this Jedi Sith thing. It's actually any culture can have their own understanding of it. And the Clone Wars introduced the Night Sisters, which we're going to talk about here briefly in a second as well.
Yeah.
Which is weird because now we're sort of tap dancing between Legends and canon. Because Legends, I mean, how many different creatures were you aware of that had an understanding or practice of the Force? I mean...
if I actually had to sit down and count, it would take me a while to realize
it's
it.
like an insane...
Yeah, it made sense that there would be a spectrum. Like, it's asinine to believe that there's some massive thing that everybody in theory can tap into, and that it's only going to be one way or the other. I mean, even with the Legends, there's so many different factions of the Sith, like how the dark side is used and stuff. So yeah, it seems like it would be weird that there wouldn't be different people. Like when the Night Sisters were introduced in the Clone Wars, like that was just like, yay, they acknowledge it, hooray.
That was awesome because up until that point, I had only experienced the Night Sisters through Star Wars Galaxies, the MMO, which I was like, yeah, these are awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Like, super bad. And I thought it was, at the time, just sort of this, throwaway evil woman empowerment group of bad guys. But the fact that they would bring them in and then have major characters have connections with them and have a huge story arc.
Oh, yeah.
Maul was connected to them. That was fucking awesome. Like, that was incredible. And so that entire arc in the Clone Wars trilogy, I thought, brought that particular group to light. But I wanted to talk about the Lasat briefly, just because we have a very different understanding of different cultures connecting with the Force in different ways. So beyond them, of course, again, we're going to talk about the Night Sisters here. This was exciting to me because it's one thing to be introduced to another culture that explores ideas of the Force from a lighter aspect.
Yeah.
But to find a group of female-empowered individuals that solely explored the darker aspect of it. I mean, if you're a fan of witches, like just like the sort of Halloweeny, witchy, like the bad girl, like I am, there's nothing greater. Yeah.
It's the epitome of it. I mean, they even in the shows, they use them using their dark magic for healing purposes and stuff. Like, that's the epitome of witch type of thing. Like, it's it's great to see it. That was horrible.
That was awesome. Yeah, no, straight up. And it was just so exciting. The visuals were so dark, and to know that, as far as the EU information, like, they would tame rancors, and they would ride rancors. Holy shit, the greatest.
Yeah, you don't get much more badass than that.
My favorite creature from the original trilogy. Like, the most feared monster that only Luke Skywalker could have defeated, they're taming and just riding like horses. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
Oh, man. And then there's a bunch of others that were... So I'm going to sort of go through like different Force species here, and not really diving into their individual cultures or anything. But the Dianoga, which
still blows my mind. Like, I just found that out from you, and that's just like...
You've got to read
shit.
that book from another perspective or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It is great. Like, tons of really wonderful stories explaining Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan's experience becoming one with the Force, and just sort of, stories from a different perspective. But even the mouse droid on the Death Star, when the original trilogy, when Han and Chewie and Luke are like walking up, and the little mouse droid comes running up and sees Chewie, and Chewie barks at him like, "Rah!" And then mouse droid's all, "Wee!" and like turns around and runs away. There's like a whole homosexual arc between K2-421 and a commander on the Death Star, connected by that mouse droid. Like, it's insane.
I'm gonna go buy this book tomorrow.
Have to read. Like, I did the audiobook from the library, but it is brilliant. Like, there are so many weird connected tissues that explain, or just explore really crazy, outlandish ideas, but it's all connected with A New Hope, the film. But this particular one with this trash compactor monster was brilliant. Like, it explained from a creature's perspective that was taken by the Empire out of its homeland and put inside this metal container that it didn't understand, but its connection to the Force helped it sort of not really understand where it was, but explain its experience for the reader. I mean, it's weird. It's really, really weird, but it's really kind of cool. And to know that there's other species through the story that experience the Force in different ways, much like a blind person would experience life in a different way than someone who can see. It really put the Force in a different perspective for me, and put the idea of creatures manipulating or seeing the world through the Force in a very interesting way. So that was cool.
I need to check it out.
The Jedi, of course, the Jedi Order and the Sith, depending on how far you want to go back with Legends and EU, it gets really interesting. But what canon had brought forth that was always alluded to in the original was the wills, this idea of the wills, which in original sort of legend capacity was George Lucas's way of explaining the Celestials, but in the Legends way of sort of personifying them, they're monks, the guardians of the wills. They're monks that protect this religion of the Force. And that's explored through Rogue One and Chirrut Imwa, or whatever his name was, and his buddy with the heavy weapons. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank too right now. That's horrible.
But that was interesting. The Guardian of the Wills, they're sort of just worshippers of the idea of the Force, even though that most of them never had any connection to it, which was strange and interesting way to do it. They're sort of like penmen. They would write down events that were surrounding the Force. Fans. They were the fanboys of the Force back in the day. You had Force wielders, you had Force priestesses, as we talked before. You had the Night Sisters of Dathomir, and then there was another group that was explored in the Clone Wars. It was the Dagoian Order. So there's a whole bunch of different Force-sensitive groups that interpret the Force in vastly different ways between the Clone Wars and the Rebels cartoon series that expanded this view of the Force. So going from one old man saying that it's the Force between that connects us and binds us, to being this cultural exploration of Avatar-infused amorphous powers, like sentient amorphous powers, it becomes really kind of crazy. And then Rebels introduced this idea of animals. So not only do sentient species have a connection through the Force, but you have non-communicative sentient species becoming avatars. So there was the Convor, which was sort of like a messenger, is like this owl that Rebels brought out, that most right now are theorizing Ahsoka has become an Avatar Force. Spoiler for those who haven't seen Rebels. Ahsoka Tano, the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker, is alive for a little while. I'll just leave it at that. And then there's like these lone Loth wolves, which are sort of like the crystal foxes, but bigger, more scary. They're wolves, but they have a connection with the Force, and they're helping guide the Star Wars Rebels heroes, Ezra Bridger specifically, in that storyline. And then you have something that was a story arc in the Rebels that was very interesting, and it made me think that they were going to bring the Grey Jedi out. It's called the Bendu. So this was so this is a Loth wolf there, but this is the Bendu. So this is this sentient creature who refuses to identify with the light or dark side of the Force, claiming that he has this greater understanding of the Force because he doesn't stick to one side or the other, and he becomes a mentor for some of the Prime Jedi characters in the Rebels cartoon series. And it really made everyone think that oh fuck, what's her name in the new series? I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on her name. Help me out here, buddy.
Could be worse. Could be me. I've never seen any of them except for the first season.
The new Jedi girl. I can't remember her name. The Mary Sue from The Force Awakens.
Oh,
we're a Star Wars show and we can't remember.
How the hell did we forget Rey?
Rey! Oh, fucking hell.
Oh my god. Again, I've never even seen a Star Wars. I don't know what
Sorry, we thought we were talking about Star Trek. There were so many theories that Rey would be coming out as a Grey Jedi because of the Rebels series, alluding to this idea of this new aspect of the Force, and even exercising it over Admiral Thrawn's forces, fighting them back, allowing the Rebels to escape from one of the planets that they had a Rebel base on. It was a huge story arc, and it lasted almost the entire third season of Star Wars Rebels, and it was a big deal. Actually, I think it broke into the fourth season as well. But either way, it was this huge exploration of a new aspect of the Force. That, yes, it wasn't just different cultures interpreting the light and the dark side in different ways, or exploring the aspects of the light and the dark side in different ways, or the celestial family trying to maintain balance, or the idea of the chosen one. No, this was something outside of all of that, completely separate from the light and dark, that was autonomous within itself, that experienced the Force and manifested the Force in incredibly powerful ways. Like, if you ever saw the episodes, it's like this Force storm the Bendu creates in order to defeat Thrawn from the EU, Thrawn's forces, which is an amazing episode. It wasn't that great, but if you think about the theories of the episode or the possibilities of the episode, it's much more exciting. So it was crazy. So the Force has just become this mess of understanding. All right, so what's the next one? Okay, so that's all the images I have. And so we come into the new trilogy. We are 2 episodes in. We're an hour into this episode. So this is going to be where we sort of wrap up this idea of the evolving idea of the Force that the Star Wars universe has provided us. And it's introduced a new form of the Force. And that's that everyone has the Force. And you could go back and say, well, they introduced that with the midi-chlorians and the prequels, where everyone has midi-chlorians, but not everyone has enough. And so it's not that far removed from the idea of it. But
well, I mean, you can argue even from the first movie that it explains that everybody has it. It's just only certain individuals can control it or manipulate it.
And only through training. Like, that has always been a theme throughout every EU and now canon movie and cartoon and novel and comic, video game. Every exploration of this idea of the Force is that you have to be trained in it in order to manifest it. And this new trilogy, starting with The Force Awakens and now with The Last Jedi, introduces Rey, now that we remember her name,
yes.
She never had to train. She never
No, just
had
went
to
straight into it.
sacrifice. She never had to endure. She just simply manifested it when she needed it. And it introduced the great character Maz Kanata, which also, much like the Bendu, didn't take a side, but she could still manifest the Force in her own right. But this is my greatest complaint about this new series, is that we have a universe of movies and etc. explaining that you have to work for this power. And then this new series explains that no, you don't have to.
Well,
you just have
honestly, that's not even something new. I mean, look at Anakin in the first episode. Like his pilot or his pod racing. Like that's not something he was trained in. He just jumped in and just did it. And through using Jedi reflexes, that's how he didn't die. So, I mean, I know it's a stretch. I know I'm really grasping at straws, but it is kind of one of those things that obviously it's not to the same extent. I mean, piloting something that you watch and work on day in, day out. I mean, to an extent, I guess there is some training, but with her to be like, oh, doo-doo-doo, I'm just some poor girl that collects things, to being like, oh, I'm gonna fuck up Kylo Ren with his lightsaber. I mean, it is quite a severe jump compared to even say Anakin.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Anakin was very much using the innate reflexes of his connection with the Force. And the fact, and here's the big difference between the two. Anakin was the chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
Created whole cloth out of the Force. Rey is just an average person. She is not special. It is made very clear in the movies and in the novels. She is not special. She is just a normal person from normal parentage that happens to be perfect. And there's no story arc within her character to develop or to challenge or to evolve. She just picks up a lightsaber and she's a master. She bests Kylo Ren. She bests Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker. I mean, she is innately good at piloting, at speaking to droids, speaking other creatures. She's innately good at a gunner in The Last Jedi. Everything she does, she is perfect at. But it has no special connection to the Force over anyone else, as is explained in all of the material. And so it changes the idea of the Force. You had to be the chosen one to do what she does. And now she's just nobody, as explained, and she can do everything. And so it does change the nature of the Force. And it's really solidified that idea of within my head, that the Force is not a special thing, that anyone can be as grand as anyone, as powerful as Snoke or Yoda or the Emperor or Vader or Luke or anyone. In that final scene of The Last Jedi, where the boy just sort of picks up the broom and stares off at the stars. You have the future of this series fundamentally altering the view of the Force even more. So it's not just expanding on it like everything preceding it has.
Yeah.
Like even content that's being generated now in animated stories is just expanding on it. It's fundamentally altering it so that everyone has the Force and everyone is special. It is literally the Generation X version of parenting for Star Wars and explaining the Force. You're special.
Yeah.
Everyone is special. Which as a viewer is frustrating, as a fan of the series is frustrating, as someone who tries to find some way of adding meaning to this stupid fantasy world is frustrating as fuck. So, I mean, where do you think it goes from here?
God, I don't know. That's the sad thing. Like it used to be, you could read a comic, read a book, listen to a show, something like that, and you kind of at least get a little bit of an inkling, because they don't quite show you the cards, but they kind of give you a quick side view. So you kind of know. With this, I mean, Rian Johnson made it very clear that the Star Wars as we know, it's dead. Like, it is a whole new creature now. I don't know. I mean, the biggest shocker was, I mean, not... Okay, so when the kid first picks up the broom at the end, I mean, that was a really big moment for me. Like, everybody else, I mean, it's like, oh, that's cool. But it's like, no, that completely changes everything, like how the Force is. But But aside from that, Yoda using lightning as a ghost, like that just
We didn't even mention that. Yes.
like, I mean, I'm cool with it, to be fair, because it's fucking Yoda. Like, if anybody could be a ghost and still, alter the physical realm, it would be Yoda. But yeah, that's completely against what we know, what we've been taught over the years. So I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go, how it's going to go.
Draven is saying Luke says that she has so much raw power that it scares him, and hints that Kylo was the only other person he's encountered with power like that. If that doesn't scream Chosen One, what does? Well, Draven, just to explain like the behind-the-scenes commentary behind all of that, is that the cosmic force created the idea or imbued the idea of, and this is supposed to be explored in the new Last Jedi novel that I have yet to read, but
well, it's not out yet.
It's alluded to because there are pre-release versions that people have that are leaking. But it's alluded to the cosmic force and the living force created or imbued Rey with the power that she has in order to counterbalance Kylo Ren because he is so innately powerful. Mm-hmm. Which, if it does in fact turn out that way, well, then that is no different than the Chosen One coming to counterbalance the Sith, except that Kylo Ren isn't a Sith, has been force-fed to us. He's just... And he's not even pure dark side, as evidenced by Snoke's hatred and just sickening way of communicating with the kid. Like, he's just like, you and your pathetic mask, take that off. You have light in you and it's disgusting. Don't be like your grandfather. Like, he's a vicious bully to this little kid.
Yeah, it's just an abusive asshole.
Which proves, and even Kylo Ren's behavior proves that he is not fully dark side. So it's not like he's an emperor that needs to be counterbalanced in the cosmic force like the original. So we are forced to rethink this idea of balance and cosmic force versus living force creating these balances. And it's strange that we have throughout this entire time talked about how the force has begun, evolved, changed, modified, and everything, to have it go back to a prequel version in order to explain, ignoring all of the development of the force from the prequels to now, is really strange to me. Like, why do you have to go to those solidified good and bad tropes when we have explored all these different avenues of the Force? Like, you don't have to do that anymore. Like, you could have good writing and not resort to the ultimate good versus the ultimate bad guy.
Yeah.
And it could still be engaging and entertaining and easily explainable. But we always sort of revert to this really ridiculous, simplified, child, dumbed-down version of it, which is just frustrating as an adult, which I'm sure no kid cares about, but it's still frustrating for me.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of where we end up, where we don't really know where it's heading. We don't really understand, because The Last Jedi literally took everything we knew about Star Wars universe and just said, nothing is sacred anymore. Nothing you know is safe anymore. Anything can be changed. And that may be exciting for some, and that may be unsettling to others, but that literally is where we are. And so, like it or not, that's how it is. So we are forced to deal with it if we're going to continue being invested in this new, in this brand that we've grown up with. And I think it is personified in this final idea that I want to present more than anything else. And Cameron, you and I had spoken to this before we started this show, before we went live, and it's the image that was released on Twitter from Kathleen Kennedy with her and a bunch of her friends wearing t-shirts saying "The Force is female." So no longer is the Force this amorphous idea that needs balance. The Force is now a political agenda. I'm a progressive, politically, socially, in virtually every way. I'm a progressive individual. But it bothers me that there are political agendas being infused inside of a fantasy world meant solely to entertain. And ideally, the best reason of creating fiction is to help you escape reality. So to infuse reality into that is even more frustrating.
Well, the argument could be made that that's necessary, though, to have that little bit of the real world in that fantasy to give you that cathartic release. I mean, that's always been a thing as far as cinema's been concerned. I mean, look at like Night of the Living Dead. It's one of the classics, and tell me that's not a political film about racism and consumerism.
Yeah,
I mean, and that's not even just buying into it. That's not thinking about it too much. As a kid, I saw that the first time I saw it. But, I mean, yeah, stuff like that, I mean, I'm all for female empowerment and all that. I mean, God, I was raised by nothing but women. I have nothing but respect for them. But, yeah, the idea of changing stuff like that, it's reverse sexism. It's taking, like, oh, penises are bad, but vaginas are better. And no argument here.
I do believe in that. Except for my penis.
Yeah. No, my penis, it's fucking worthless.
Yeah,
whatever.
No.
But, yeah, stuff like that, it does bother me a little.
Because it is very much like there was a movement back, in the early 90s and early mid-90s, even when Dogma came out, to call back to earlier in the episode, where there was a popular idea of people claiming, well, God, if there's a God, God is a female.
Yeah,
and that would piss people off. Yeah, Alanis Morissette. It would make people upset and everything. Well, it's made up. Like, if you want to see God, if you believe in a God, good on you. If you believe that God is a female, I give a fuck. Good on you. It's all made up in my head, so I don't care. You want to say the Force is female? Okay, but it kind of bothers me that you are the executive producer of all Star Wars content moving forward, and you have a specific political agenda when referencing something that has existed for 40 fucking years and has been explained and expanded upon for 40 fucking years, and now you're adding a gender to it? Like that, I don't know why it bothers me more.
Could also just been she was wearing a t-shirt.
That's
she is an executive producer. I mean, it would make sense that the idea of the Force in a real aspect is female. I mean, it's fucking Kathleen Kennedy.
Except that Kathleen Kennedy also produced Star Forces of Destiny, the online Disney cartoon series that was focused solely on females and personifications of the Force and using the Force. I mean, there has been completely a feminization of the idea of the Force, which in and of itself I don't care about, but the idea of adding a gender to something that is not gender oriented solely for a political voice is insane to me. Like, it doesn't make, it's like saying your car must be a female or it must be a male. No, it's a fucking vehicle. Like, refer to it in him or her when you're referring to it. I don't care. That just speaks more to you as an individual. But to define it moving forward for an audience and for every fan who has already been living with this idea for 40 years as a gender is stupid. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And knowing that she is the defining voice in saying yes or no for future movies or storylines or versions of content to be released, why does it have to have a gender associated with it? It doesn't. I love women, but why does that have to be infused in it? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know.
No. If it is going to be that way, then they better damn well explain it properly. Like, make it make sense to people like us.
Yeah.
I mean, average movie-going person, or even the people that just started off with Star Wars with this current trilogy, they're not going to care. It's already completely different than what it was. But I can get behind that. I can honestly get behind the idea of the Force somehow having a gender, but they better damn well explain it properly. and not just be like, oh no, it is. We lifted up the skirt. Thought it was kilt. Nope, it's a skirt.
I'd be okay if I could see pictures.
Yes.
All I'm saying. I want pictures. Pictures or it didn't happen. Damn it.
Damn straight.
All
Those
right.
are rules.
I think that's as far as we should probably go.
Yeah.
The Force.
Yeah. Definitely no further.
Thank you guys for tuning in live. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And thank you for everyone watching this after the fact. And let us know in the comments how you see the Force. Does gender need to be included? Has the Force even really jumped the shark in its explanation throughout the 40 years that it's been explained? Is it different at all from episode 4 till now? Or has it just been clarified? Or maybe, has it completely changed and has it bothered you? Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, please do.
We really appreciate the interaction. And for all of you tuning in live, we're going to be doing this again. Cameron said at the very top of the show, we're doing this twice a month. Second and fourth Sunday of every month at 7 p.m. every time. We're going to have a live show.
New standard time.
Yeah, and Mountain Standard Time. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click that little bell icon so you'll get notified every time we have a new show that's live or up and coming, or whenever we go live, or however the fuck it works. I don't know. But yeah. And if you want to contribute to the show, you can do so by commenting, by joining us live, or by sending us your I am a scruffy looking Nerf Herder videos. It takes 2 seconds, no effort, and we really appreciate it.
The one you guys saw beginning of this episode, we were drunk as shit, and I said, hey, I need to record you real quick. It's that easy.
And what email can they send that to?
Well, Adam, that's theinfernalbrotherhood at gmail.com.
All right, hook it up, people.
Please do. We need more.
Yeah. So, until next time, may the Force be with you.
Never tell me the odds.
I don't know where my exit button is.
Oh, the comment never gets old.